English wine has been around a long, long time. The Romans were in England 2,000 years ago. And when I say England, I'm talking about England, Wales, Scotland. Okay, so the wine in England comes under the Wine GB banner. So they're British wines. What has been pretty much discovered is all through the south of England and a little bit north as well. It's very similar soil to that in Chablis and that in Champagne. So you've got this Kimmeridgian limestone, a real core, like a line of chalk and limestone that goes through Champagne and a bit into Chablis.
Today we're attending a masterclass on English wines with Tony Park. I'm Jason.
And I'm Trent, and we're here on an unapologetically unprofessional, unfiltered wine journey. And we're saying here, Jace.
Our saying is drink more, try more, learn more. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Tony, thank you for joining us.
Welcome. Great to be here.
It's
such a hot day.
Yeah, it's a very warm day here in Sydney, but we can cool down and enjoy some wines. We're going to learn a lot about English wines and learn about your story. But as always, we ask the icebreaker questions from the Winedup. I'll hand over to Trent.
First one, most memorable wine.
Some years ago, I was living in Paris.
Yeah.
I was working for an organisation, and they asked me to go there for a 2-year assignment. And so I thought, fancy this, right? So right round from where I was living, there was this little restaurant called Chez Catherine, and it was the tiniest little bistro, and the food was great. But the guy Catherine was the owner of the restaurant. She was the cook, the chef, and her husband, I've forgotten his name. He was front of house. So I'd look at the list, and I'd look in the wine list, and I'm going, hang on a second, these prices don't look right. So I called the guy over, and I said to him, can I just check that these prices are right? And he went, yeah. And I said, I don't understand. Why are they so cheap? And he said, well, I've had them in my personal cellar for years and years and years. And so this restaurant is all about being open for everybody, not being, such a high level that the average person couldn't get in. So he said, all I do is I double the price that I paid for them, and then I'm getting a return and I'm seeing people enjoy the wine. And I went, wow. So he opened a 1988 Grand Echezot from Leroy Biz from Burgundy.
Yeah.
And it was one of those wines that after the first glass, I just didn't want that wine ever to leave the glass. I was like, I just wanted to wrap my arms around it and hold it and cuddle it and caress it. Yeah. And that's probably the day I fell in love with wine. I always liked wine, but then I thought, now I understood it. And I've never had that experience since because I can't afford the real prices for the wine. And I think it was 88 euros or, under 100 pounds UK. And in a restaurant, under 100 quid. Right?
Yeah.
These wines now are 10 figures, they're like $10,000 dollars and pounds a bottle. So that was my experience of proper Burgundy from a producer of, extreme quality.
What was the last wine that you had?
Probably a Nick Spencer Riesling. I was in Newtown on Friday night, and I shared a really nice glass of Australia. I like Australian Riesling. I like the Western Australian, South Australian styles, which tend to be a bit more petrol-y, and they've got that really strong slate kind of nose, steely nose. And then I love the Rieslings from high elevation. I love Rieslings from Canberra. Ken Helm does a super Riesling. Nick O'Leary does a super Riesling from down those areas. Orange are doing good Rieslings. Robert Stein from Mudgee is doing a really good Riesling. So I think those higher elevations, and they're different. They're a touch lighter.
Yeah.
And I think they're a little bit more German in style. So you haven't got that pungency.
Awesome. Next question. A person past or present they'll love to have a bottle of wine with, and also what bottle would you choose?
I would have a bottle of wine with my late father. We used to go to restaurants in Sydney, and you could buy Grange Hermitage for $33 a bottle in restaurants. And he used to drink it and have it by the bucket load. And I was only about 15, 16, 17, and he would pass me a glass of Grange Hermitage and he says, this is what great Australian wine tastes like. What do you think? And I'm like, it's all right, it's red wine.
Yeah.
And he used to pull his hair out at me, like I do now with people. And he'd pull his hair out and he'd say, taste this. So I would love to go back and actually have a bottle of Grange Hermitage with my dad and say, come on now, I get it now. You were right, I was wrong. Let's share a bottle of Grange. So I'd do that.
Do you think that love of wine has kind of traveled down from your father to yourself?
Oh, God, that's a great question. I tell you what my dad made me do. My dad made me question every single decision I took. He made me question all my decisions in terms of career, and not question being self-critical, just be curious and be exploratory. So he would give me a wine and say, well, okay, if you like it, why do you like it? What is it about it? Or a beer or whatever. And he just, that gentle push, and that gentle push has always stayed with me. So yeah, in some ways, he forced me to be curious about wine.
Oh, that's a great way to approach wine. Don't settle. Always think, always ask the question, explore curiosity. No, that's great. Next one. Favorite grape varietal?
Chardonnay.
Chardonnay.
I fell out of love with Chardonnay for 20 years. We used to have, I was talking about my sister earlier, and she drinks a certain style of wine. So 20 years ago, she drank Rosemount Estate Chardonnay. And it was this 14.5%, 15% from the Hunter Valley. It was golden in color. I mean, deep yellow, oak, bang. And she used to drink, and I hated it. I hated it but I didn't know why I didn't like it. Because at the end of the day, you're having a glass of wine. And what I found out is I didn't like the imbalance. It was over-oaked, over-alcoholized. The fruit, you couldn't get the fruit. And then maybe 10, 15 years ago, Australia went completely the other way. And I don't know if you remember, you started to get unoaked Chardonnays. I don't know if you remember that. And then I used to drink the unoaked Chardonnays when I used to come back. And it was like, I don't know what you're trying to do here. Chardonnay from Burgundy has oak, right? It doesn't have to have a lot of oak, but it has oak. And it didn't have any oak. And I thought, you're trying to go too far the other way. But I think what they're doing now, Beechworth is one, Yarra Valley is another, Margaret River is another, and some others around Canberra and Mudgee and
Tasmania as well.
Tasmania, absolutely, Trent. And so I'm seeing the wines now and I'm going, oh my God, these are delicious. These are delicious wines, which is what you want them to be. So I'd say I love Sangiovese. I love Riesling. I love Semillon. I love some of those Italian varietals, Fiano. I think Fiano is going to be great in Australia. I really do. I love a Fiano. But yeah, Chardis. Australian Chardonnays are just so good.
I feel it is going through a resurgence, and you're completely correct. It did go kind of one way. I was turned off it, and now it's kind of coming good. I think having a few of those Beechworth ones, especially when typicity, and also sense of place is really starting to show, which I love. So yeah, I completely agree, and that's also my favorite at the moment as well. You've drunk a lot of wines. You also probably had a lot of food as well. Unique food and wine pairings. Is there one that kind of stands out?
I think, the classic is cheese. And I think a lot of people get it wrong where they go red wine with cheese and it doesn't work. So I think you could try Comté, which is a very unique style of French cheese. And I think you could pair that with some lovely white wines, like the Chardonnays we were talking about, some of the Italian varietals, but also it would go brilliant with Jura wines. I don't know if you know Jura. Some of the wines from there, the Savignon or Gros Manseng or something like that. I just think, try it.
Yeah.
Try to work out what goes. I was having an interesting conversation with a doctor, and they were talking about saliva, which isn't, the most interesting conversation to be having with a doctor. But it was all down to the individual DNA of your saliva and how that reacts with food and wine, and everyone's different. So you might find a wine tannic and you might find a wine tannic and I might not find that wine tannic. And that's not because any of us are wrong. It's because our saliva profiles and the way our taste buds work and the way our body is, we don't respond to those kind of sensitivities. It's like sulfites in wine, right?
Yeah.
So that's a sensitivity thing. It's not an allergy, it's a sensitivity. And I'm fine with sulfites. And other people are not. Yeah. And that was really interesting about the saliva. So I find I don't put things in boxes with food and wine. Like I'll have a red wine with a fish. I just like the fish to be a bit heavier. Barramundi, I love barramundi. I think it would go great with chilled red. But something from the Loire like Chinon or at Etna, somewhere from Sicily where you can chill it. And you do that with the red, because you have barbecues all the time, right? So you put a barramundi on the barbecue.
With a bit of char on it as well, with a bit of Chinon.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then all of a sudden you get the interplay. Now that would work really, really well. See, I think the other thing with Australia, it's you don't chill red wines enough.
No. We always have it too warm, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm not talking a Shiraz, but some of those lighter styles like Gamay. I did delicious Gamay in orange from Seesaw,
Yeah.
the winery. It was delicious. I said to them, chuck it in the fridge. And they said, well, we haven't got the space. And I said, well, bring out an ice bucket and put it. And everyone's looking at me and it was delicious. And I was with my mum and my sister and they said, oh, we never would have thought of that. It's just 15, 20 minutes.
Fantastic. So there we go. Comte and maybe a nice Chardonnay.
Or Barramundi with a chilled Gamay or a chilled
Cab Franc from Chinon. Yeah, definitely. You've been in the industry for a while now. What's like the best kind of lesson learned? What's the best advice that you've been given that you can give to people kind of about to explore their wine journey?
There's a lot to know and it can be really intimidating and it can put people off. It's like trying to learn accountancy. And I think with wine, we're not trying to turn people into accountants or mechanics, but there's technical stuff you have to learn. And some people say, oh, that's pretentious, take away the technical stuff. No, you need the technical stuff. That gives you the structure of the conversation. And it also allows you to say, well, if I like this and there's a structure around it, then I'm probably going to like that. So what I would say to people is don't be put off by the technical terms. Just learn them like you would learn your ABCs and learn basic math. Just learn. Make it okay that you don't know something.
Yeah.
And don't get scared.
Yeah.
By asking a sommelier for advice. Don't get scared to go walk into a vintage cellars or a Dan Murphy's or whatever it is and ask for their help because that's how you're going to learn. And I suppose the other thing is trust your own palate.
Yeah.
I've had some amazing wines. People have said they're amazing and I'm like, I don't get it. I just don't get it.
To your point before about curiosity and asking the questions on if you don't like it, why don't you like it? If you like it, why do you like it? And that technical element to it is probably more around language and communication. So you start to say why I don't like it's probably too tannic, to your point, or too acidic or something else.
And then with tannin, it's great. You challenge yourself and you say, well, do you drink tea?
Yeah.
And they go, well, yeah, I drink tea. Well, there's tannin in tea. So let me explore that in a minute because something's not lining up. Do you eat bananas?
Yeah.
Well, there's tannin in banana. So we've got tannin in tea and we've got tannin in banana. So, and you eat grapes. Right? So there's tannin in red grapes. So where's the inconsistency? That's what I want to explore. Yeah. And that normally comes down to sensitivity.
Yeah.
So, and that's why some people like light red wines, which have less tannin versus high red wines like Sagrantino or something. You went up to Sadler's Creek and Sagrantino. That stuff's really tannic, or whatever.
Geez, that was the quick fire questions.
Sorry. I
feel like we already learned a fair bit out of that. So we're going to learn heaps more on the English wines masterclass here. A bit more about yourself. You talked about, there's a need to kind of be curious, ask questions. What sparked your curiosity? Why are you interested in wine?
I don't like not knowing things. Okay, so ever since I was a young boy, if I didn't know, I think Google was made just for me. Right? So when I was a kid, my mum and dad bought me the Encyclopedia Britannica. You probably might not know what that is. Right?
I had one.
Oh, okay. Did you? Right.
Yes.
So, and I read it. I read dictionaries. My dad bought me a thesaurus. He forced me to do crosswords, all that kind of stuff. And with food, I get food. It's simple. Okay, the combination is the interesting thing, but I get a steak. It's not that complex. I get a piece of fish. It's not that complex. But I couldn't understand wine. I couldn't get it. And no one could explain it because back in the 70s and 80s, there was no one around to explain it to you. It was just, well, you'd have to go to a scientist from Roseworthy or something. Yeah. But nowadays it's different. You've got social media and podcasts like your own, and so it's much easier to understand it. But in those days, you didn't know, and I want to know why that does that.
Yeah,
and there was nothing out there in those days. So, I bought loads of books. The money on books I've got. It's just crazy. And I'm reading the books on all sorts of viticulture. And so I'm a voracious reader of that kind of stuff. And if I don't understand something, I have to read it like 10 times.
Okay, so you enjoyed wine, but you were curious about it. You wanted to understand how it's made. How do those flavors get through?
I like the taste too.
And then you love the taste. And then your career as a wine educator and wine consultant, I could understand how that comes through because if you've learned a whole piece of knowledge around wine, you can share that with the world. What is a wine consultant and wine educator?
Move away from the wine world for a moment. Yeah. You look at a consultant, KPMG, Dun & Bradstreet, McKinsey, you hear of all these people, they're all in Sydney or they've got big offices. They're providing consulting to large organizations. And, it's like, show me your watch and I'll tell you the time. And that's the negative side of it. It's like, tell you what you already know. But I think what consulting really is what I was coming to earlier is not telling anyone anything, but actually asking them. And so what it is, if I ask you, it makes you think, and then most of the time you'll come up with the right answer.
Yeah.
And if you come up with the right answer, then I've done my job, but you wouldn't have got there without me probing and coaching and all that sort of stuff. So I think what good consultants do is they ask you to think and explore and analyze and raise your awareness about what you know and what you don't know, about what your beliefs are and the beliefs that you maybe have got wrong, and your discriminations and biases, and challenge that. And even though you might not like what I say, you accept it because I don't work for you and I don't care if you take that advice.
Yeah.
But if you want me to give some advice, I'll give it to you. You don't have to take it. And I'm not a father, so I don't have a vested interest to being nice with anybody. I can, I'll ask you the question, right? I'll say, how direct do you want me to be? How honest do you want me to be? Because I can lie to you if you want.
Yeah.
If you want to feel comfortable, I'll just lie to you, and I'll still charge you the money and walk out the door. So, and then nobody says that. They'll go, no, tell me the truth. I go, here's what I think. I don't like your wine.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't think it's balanced, at least not to my palate. So for me, it's over alcoholized. It's too much tannin. There's too much acid. Where's the fruit? I'll just ask the questions. I said, for my palate. You might have 10 other people who don't think that. But that question, you should be really thinking about the question, whether that's true or not, and just check it a third time and a fourth time. And hopefully, because you're the winemaker and I'm not, I'm just a drinker, you will then say, no, I'm right. That's what I want it to be. And 9 out of 10 people are correct. You're wrong. I'm happy with that. It's not an ego thing.
So you're a drinker, you're an educator, communicator.
Mm-hmm.
You should have your finger on the pulse in terms of what consumer trends are.
Mm-hmm.
What do you see at the moment, though?
I mean, what everybody tells me and what I'm reading is not necessarily what I'm seeing. Okay, so that's okay because I'm questioning. So everybody says young people are not into wine, and there's a huge, all the young people are coming out of, whatever schools, and they've got the money, whatever. I just did, yesterday I went on an urban wine walk in Surrey Hills. And I don't know how many people were there, maybe 250, 300, 400, I don't know. And the way they did it was there were 7 venues, 8 venues, and people were just mingling, going to different venues, trying the different wines. The amount of young people was amazing. So I'm questioning if someone's saying young people aren't getting into wine, why were 90% of those people all young people? And I'm not talking about 30s and 40s. I'm talking about 20s and 30s. There weren't teens, clearly, because they weren't allowed. But there was 20 and young 30-year-old people there really enjoying the experience. So I'm thinking, I think the trend or the new trend will be, yes, how do we get new young people into wine? Because they're going to be the future of wine. But how can we do that in an inclusive way? Like a really fun way. Like what they did was fun. Yeah. You got out, you walked around, you went into a couple of pubs you wouldn't have gone into, a couple of bars you would never have gone into before. So that whole new learning kind of thing is, wow, this is a really nice area and I can walk around and I can do, but it's full of young people. Yeah. I think the second biggest trend, I mean, obviously there's a financial thing going where people's wine drinking is going down all over the world. So a lot of countries are suffering with that. I think politically, there's loads of issues with tariffs and import costs. I think that's an issue. The other one's sustainability. I think a lot of people are really caring about. England has just introduced a bottle return scheme, which is fantastic. They've had them in France and Italy for years and years and years. But they don't have a co-op system in the UK where they do in Europe. So, I think that's brilliant, a bottle return scheme. So then all you do is they clean the bottles and reissue the same bottle and it just gets used over and over and over again.
Now, today we're going to have a masterclass on English wines. And before we jump into that, it's probably good to talk about, you've spent a fair bit of time in England and your experience, I think WSET trained. So a bit of overview on your experience in this area.
I think the first thing to understand, English wine has been around a long, long time. So it's not, the Romans were in England 2,000 years ago. And when I say England, I'm talking about England, Wales, Scotland. Okay, so the wine in England comes under the wine GB banner. So they're British wines. So otherwise you upset everybody, and it's not. However, the 2 wines we have today to look at are English, and there's a reason for that. So wine's been around a long time, but because of the climate, grapes just wouldn't grow. And technology's changed as well in terms of how we can do that. So with a shift of technology and with a shift of climate change, what has been pretty much discovered is all through the south of England and a little bit north as well, It's very similar soil to that in Chablis and that in Champagne. So you've got this Kimmeridgian limestone. You might have heard of this. It's just a real core, like a line of chalk and limestone that goes through Champagne and a bit into Chablis, which is why you get those really steely, kind of chalky, bright, really nice flavors. But the grapes have got to grow, and pretty much for hundreds of years, it's stopped on the French side. But as things have got warmer and the English have got better at making wine, it's now moving on to the south of England. And now all of those areas in the south of England have got the capability of producing some amazing wines. So most of them are doing sparkling wine. So I would argue 80% of wine in England is sparkling wine. And the reason for that is because of the soils, the terroir, and an appreciation that they can make really good sparkling. English sparkling wine is sensational, and it's won awards against all the French stuff. It's very sought after. They're using it now in the Grand Prix. They're splashing. The English Grand Prix doesn't use champagne anymore. It uses English sparkling wine. So, it's getting a really good reputation globally, and it's lovely. So what you've got in the UK is over 50% of vineyards are planted with Chardonnay and Pinot Noir, because they're making traditional style sparkling wine in the French method, traditional champenoise method. Of course, they can't call it champagne because it's not champagne, as you know, so it's sparkling wine, but it's made exactly the same. And I think the fourth or fifth grape is Pinot Meunier. So that raises it to 60%. So what you have is you've got 60% of grapes that are fundamentally planted to do sparkling wine. I've not brought any sparkling wine with me because Australia has its own sparkling wine. It's made by really good producers such as House of Arras down in Tasmania. They use the champenoise style as well. That is world-class wine. So I decided not to do that. Let's look at some of the still stuff. And the still stuff is completely different varieties because of the climate.
Yeah, you talked about soils before, the chalk. I remember going through a channel, you saw like the White Cliffs of Dover. Is that the chalk you're talking about, that kind of white?
Yeah, it's all chalk and limestone.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic.
So we did have an opportunity to try some English sparkling for a previous episode that you'd shared some, but...
Yeah, you mentioned I think, is that the NYTimber effect?
NYTimber.
That's the one.
So how did that come about? When did that happen? What do you see in terms of that kind of shift now?
I can't remember when it started, but I think the bottom line was it was a high quality wine. And when you get a high quality wine being looked at by a bunch of people who know what they're talking about, it's hello, wow. It's almost like that Judgment of Paris thing in 76. I don't think it was like that, but and NYTimber and Gusbourne and Chapel Down and Simpsons. I could start to name a whole bunch of other sparkling wine producers, and they're making great stuff. And the NYTimber effect was they were the first ones who really, and they did a bit of marketing around it as well. So, and that always helps, if you can market it well. But it was good. It was really, really good wine.
Yeah,
I just can't afford it.
How does it compare to champagne, though?
I think you've got to be careful. Champagne. No, I do. I'm going to be honest, right? One of the challenges that I think English wine has is the cost. So the cost of land is like Napa Valley. Okay, so if you want to have land in England, it's not cheap, and if you're going to get hectares of land to do wine growing, that's a lot of money, and then you're going to build a cellar door. So there's millions and millions of pounds worth of investment. How are they going to get that back? Because they can't wait like Europeans have. So if you were growing wine in Europe, and you can just pick your own country, that vineyard has been passed down by 5, 6, 7, 8 generations. So the cost of the land has already been paid for. Yeah. You haven't got to do that. The cost of the house has already been paid for. The cellar door is in the winery cellar. You just pop in and they give you 2 stools and you sit down. There's no proper cellar doors, not really. And so that's a more modern thing in places like Italy and France where they've got modern cellar doors. That's very, very new and recent. The older producers, I was in Alsace 2 years ago. This is a crazy story. And I'm in this person's winery, and there's just a table like this. That's it. That's the winery. That's the cellar door. Yeah. And above is this huge food. So you know what a food is? It's a wine cask, but it's huge.
Yep.
Okay. And on the top was 1624. So I asked them, what's the 1624 for? And they said, well, that's when we first started making wine. And I'm going 400 years ago in 2 years. So I said, what are you doing for your birthday? And they said, what do you mean? I said, well, you're going to be 400 years old in 2 years' time. I was there in 2022. And they went, oh, yeah. Oh, we didn't even think about it. And I'm like, because it's a family-run business for generation after generation. So they have no cost. They can produce. People say, why is European wine cheap? It's not cheap because of production. It's cheap because they don't have the land cost and the facilities cost. It's that makes it cheap. I mean, don't get me wrong, you get levels. In England, they haven't got that. It's very much like Australia, but Australia, you can go out to land like you can pick anywhere you want. Yeah. And if you do the right topography tests and geology tests, you can say, do you know what? We can make some great wine here. The land's cheap. Yeah. In England, it's not because of the density of population. And in the south of England, that's where the majority of people live. So it's more expensive to live in the south which is why I don't live in the south, because I can't afford to live there, because it's hugely expensive. We're talking millions and millions of pounds for properties. So the rich people live there. So to make their money, what the English wines are doing, I'll give you an example. I was going to do a wine tour for England. I was going to go down in the train and all the rest of it. It was going to cost me something in the region of $5,000. Once you've got accommodation, transportation, food, once you do that for a couple of people, and then there's 60 and 70 pounds, so $150 for tastings. Yeah, okay, they're making it an experience to attract the young people, and that's fine if you live local. In London, you can just get the train down and do it for one afternoon. It's an experience. But if you're going down to visit the region, it's prohibitive. Yes. I can't do it. I tangibly cannot afford to spend thousands. And to give you the analogy, I was looking at going down, and in the end, I got a flight to Pisa for 84 quid, right? Return, $150 flight to Pisa from Manchester, hired a car and drove all around Tuscany for a week, and it still didn't come anywhere near the cost of going down to England. So that's a huge challenge for England.
How do they get over that? Sounds like a big barrier for growth.
It is. It is. And what will happen is the people with money will buy the thing. And here's the challenge. The price points of English sparkling wine are the same price points of really expensive champagne, right? £75 a bottle, £80 a bottle, sometimes more. Well, I don't know about you, but I'm not spending 80 quid on a bottle of champagne. Mm-hmm. I don't spend £80 on a bottle of wine very often, maybe in a blue moon. Yeah. So to answer your question, what's it like? I think it's a lighter version of champagne. I don't think it has, for me, it doesn't have the same energy as champagne, but I think that's because the vineyards are still young. It doesn't have that intensity. I just think that's an evolutionary thing. I think that will come. There's nothing wrong with the land, nothing wrong with the winemaking, nothing wrong with the grapes. It's all good. It's just they're young.
Sorry, I'm going to leave with the point then. If it's getting warmer there, is it also getting warmer in Champagne as well? And are the French starting to put vineyards or starting to invest?
Yes, they are. There's one or two of them investing in the UK. But you've got to remember, it's expensive to do that. Yeah. Because, yes, vineyards in Champagne are expensive, but France is a cheaper country to live in than England is. Just cost of living, Japan's more expensive than Australia, right? Mm. There's reasons for that. Historical, political reasons, economic reasons. So what you've got is a country like England where land's really expensive because it's small. And so the French people coming in, I think one of the champagne houses, I can't remember, they've collaborated with a couple of people, but one has bought some land. And yeah, they're going to be making it. Even in Champagne, I was in Champagne in December, and the growers were telling me that they've just changed the AOC regulations, and a hybrid grape has been added to the list of champagne grapes they can use now for the first time in the history of Champagne, which is however many hundreds of years old.
So their hand's getting forced. There has to be change. There has to be evolution, which is good. And I think there's one in front of us that is showing progression across the world, particularly the format. But let me show this to the screen. It's called the Uncommon Wine of England. It's a crisp white wine, and it's a wine in a can, which is showing that progression.
Sustainability.
This is exciting and interesting to try because we haven't tried an English wine before outside of that sparkling. Do you have any stories to discuss about this specific wine?
So Uncommon they're an online store. So there's no actual cellar door I don't think you can go to. I think it's an online business. And what they do is they've got their own vineyard where they take 75% of the grapes from. And then there's another 25% that they have growers from other counties in the south of England. They'll take a bunch of fruit from Essex, Crouch River or Crouch area in Essex. They'll take some from Hampshire, and these are all counties in the south of England. And then what they'll do is they'll get their winemaker to obviously then just produce the wine, and then they put it in a can, and they just named the company Uncommon.
Yeah.
This particular white wine is a blend of 70% Bacchus, and Bacchus is a hybrid variety, and 30% Pinot Blanc. So what you're going to get with this is something that I have tried this wine. You're going to get something that you probably wouldn't have anywhere else in the world. I've never heard of a Bacchus and a Pinot Blanc blend before.
I haven't had either, let alone them in a blend.
So a Pinot Blanc you get them really well from the Alsace. 100% Pinot Blanc. They can blend it with Riesling and other varietals from that area, but I've never had it with a Bacchus before. And the reason Bacchus is I think Bacchus is the third or fourth most popular grape variety grown in England because it's resistant. The biggest issue with England, which we haven't spoken about, is the rain.
Yeah,
it just rains all the time. So the last couple of years, we've had terrible periods of long rain, and it doesn't matter what you do in the vineyard, you can't keep spraying, you're going to have to find varietals that can handle the wet, and Bacchus has been proven to do that. And it was made in a laboratory. So Bacchus, I've written this down because I'll forget it. So Bacchus isn't
like the god of wine as well?
Yeah, that's right. So it's a Silvaner. They did a Silvaner Riesling cross in Germany in 1933, and then they crossed it again with Müller-Thurgau. And Müller-Thurgau is a German variety. So they put all that together because Germany's cold and wet, and they put those three together, and they came up with Bacchus.
Yeah.
In a laboratory back in 1933, some German scientist.
I felt like someone really wanted trying to grow some wine and try to some way.
I was hoping you'd say there'd be a bit of Sauvignon Blanc in there, because on the nose, I can get this it reminds me of Sauvignon Blanc on the nose specifically.
That's what I put down, Sauvignon Blanc.
Yeah, it does. There's a lot of that grassy, not the New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc, but just stuff from the Loire. So it's going to be a bit more.
Is it?
Fig or guava or something.
Is that why?
A lot of it elderflower. So, you know how we were talking about allowing people to enter wine without being too snobby and all that kind of stuff. Some of the challenges, I think the other challenge we have in the wine area is you don't have gooseberries in Australia.
Or gooseberries.
Gooseberries, yeah. So in England, we have gooseberry pie, we have gooseberry tarts. So we know what that tastes like and smells like because we eat it in pies and tarts. Like apple. You know what apple is like? Well, gooseberries are a completely different thing. And some people don't know what elderflower is. And there's elderflower wine and there's elderflowers. So this has got a lot of elderflower, which is very typical of English white wine. Bit of acacia as well.
It's got more body than what I've typically experienced with this Sauv Blanc.
Yeah, has more body, but the first thing that hit my nose was definitely Sauvignon Blanc. It has a greenness, the guava they kind of mentioned. Maybe it's the temperature, but maybe less acid than what I think of as a normal Sauvignon Blanc.
The acid is there. I would call that a high acid wine.
Is it?
I would. Because my mouth's still watering now. Because sometimes, I'm guilty of drinking wines too quickly. So I like to let it sit under my tongue. Someone told me years ago that you should always eat and drink stuff under your tongue because the top of your tongue, a lot of their taste buds have been burnt away with hot toast and hot coffee and hot tea. So, but underneath it hasn't.
Okay.
I don't know how true that is, but that's what I was told. So I always put stuff under my tongue. And so for me,
that's a good tip.
That is really... that's quite acidic, but what it's not bracing. You know how sometimes it feels like your enamel is going to get wasted away?
I'm thinking like the South Australian Rieslings, like that's high acid,
really high acid. But that one's quite high. It's just not as high as others, but that's definitely high acid. And the other thing you notice is a little bit of fizz on your tongue, and that fizz is I spoke to the winemaker, they've deliberately left CO2 in the wine so that when they put it in the can, it doesn't get spoiled because they're worried about the chemicals in the wine reacting with the chemicals of the can. So they've decided, I don't know if everybody does that. I haven't drunk enough canned wine to make a conclusion, but certainly I asked the winemaker and that's exactly what they said. That was a deliberate intent to leave a little bit of residual CO2 there.
But wine in a can, what have you seen in terms of the trend in the UK? Is it becoming more and more prevalent?
I think so. And I think there's 2 or 3 companies that are doing a really great job. Another one's called the Canned Wine Company, and they're doing stuff with Shiraz and Saint Laurent from Austria and a whole bunch of other different varietals. Once the technology catches up, the challenge they have is aging, because that's one of the challenges. And that's okay, because you're going to drink it. That was probably made in the last so many months, and we're drinking it now, which is great. And we all know the benefits of cans in terms of picnics and barbecues, and it's easy, concerts and all that. And it's portable. As long as I think it's going to work for white wine. I think the jury's out on the red wine, because the tannin, they're still working through how to manage the tannin with the tin, the tannin with the can, if you like, and the chemical reactions. They'll obviously work it out.
Yeah.
They'll obviously get a lining of some sort and they'll work it out. If you can transport 10,000 litre bladders across the globe with, 19 crimes or Jacob's Creek or whatever it is to England on a ship, and it's all protected in that bladder, I'm sure they'll work that out.
Yeah, when we had the Scarborough one, was a Vermentino in a can, and that was
I like
delicious.
Vermentino.
That was really good.
So what do you think on the back palate?
You mentioned earlier the Comoridian soil. But there's a touch of the chalkiness that I can taste on there, which is coming through. It's very subtle, but you can get that.
Yeah, I think that's right. It's like a talc that covers your tongue a little bit. And that chalky, talky, that's very, very synonymous with English wines.
Again, it just reminds us of Sauvignon Blanc every single time. It's that kind of freshness, greenness that comes through to it.
Really green, I think. But it's not green, herbaceous green that is like sour or bitter.
No.
You know how when you have a bit of stem, when you eat not broccoli per se, but maybe rocket or some salad, but you eat the stem bit, it's a little bit different in the profile. It's really green, or capsicum. Capsicum be that. Is that, what's the alcohol in that? I didn't check.
11%.
See, that's fat, right? 11%. It's going to be really light. It's drink now. I'd probably want it a bit colder, probably. But there's nothing, and it's not that expensive. So I think that was about, I think they're selling them for about £4 a can, $8 a can. So if you think about what's the CL in that? Was it 330 or something?
250 mil. Yep.
So 250, three of them would fit in a bottle, because the bottles are 750. So 3 cans at £6, that's 18. So you just double that, it's a $35 bottle of wine.
Yeah. No, I think it's great. I'm thinking about like the portability. You go to those music festivals, right? It's a better option to
and safer.
Beer, safer as well.
Who wants glass everywhere? So and it's recyclable.
Yeah,
which is really good. So I'm all 4 cans. I'm all 4 cans for white wine. You mentioned Jason about Sauvignon Blanc. Why are all these really cheap Sauvignon Blancs not in cans? They don't need to be in bottles.
Yeah,
You're going to drink it in the first week.
I feel like the packaging that it's in, the fact that it's canned, has no impact to the quality of the wine that we're tasting here.
And then it's just a matter of, do you like the wine?
Yes. Yeah.
That's a different conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah, completely.
I like the wine. I think it is what it says on the can, I think, in that sense. Like, I'm not looking for huge complexity. I'm not looking for a wine that's going to make me think and go, oh, those different layers of flavor. It is bright, fresh, acidic, green, refreshing wine.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
Excuse me, I totally agree. That's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
And I think it reflects a cool climate. So you haven't got the alcohol heat on that. So yeah, if you're looking for something just green and fresh and ready to go, that's lovely. The only challenge is, do you like that, or do you like Riesling, or do you like something else?
Yeah. What I'm toying around with my head is like, does it speak of English wine though? Like, if I drink that, is it go, okay, that's English wine versus Hunter in a can or something like that?
I don't think England has got the typicity worked out yet in that sense. So if you put that in a blind tasting, the average person might say it's English. If they were an MW or something, they might say, I think that's an English wine, because they've recognized the Bacchus or the Pinot Blanc or something. Probably not the Pinot Blanc, probably the Bacchus. But they probably wouldn't be able to tell you where it came from, which is the typicity question.
Yeah.
Whereas I taste a Hunter Semillon versus a Margaret River Semillon or a Adelaide Hill Semillon. No, that's Hunter.
Yeah.
You just know it's Hunter. And Adelaide Hills and Margaret River, they don't do the 7-year dumb down and then the 8-year you get this nutty, waxy lanolin kind of Semillon. They can't do that. That's just Hunter.
Yeah.
You get that and you go, that's Hunter. You just know.
Do you think that's time, but like the English wines and the regions need to have that time to form a stronger identity? Because the modern English wine regions, when did it start coming out?
There was some around the 50s and 60s.
Yeah. So it's quite young.
The NYTimber effect was big. As you mentioned, there's 2 Americans come over and they said, don't plant grapes. It's a crazy thing to do. And they did it anyway. And then when everybody thought, hell, they can do it.
Yeah.
Maybe we can too. And then it kind of exploded.
Where do you think it's going though? Because you mentioned about the cost of land being prohibitive.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see it kind of growing, the kind of English wine scene, or do you think it's going to keep quite stable in terms of where it's at?
The challenge they've got is oversupply. So if you've got a whole bunch of people who have been drinking wine in England for however many years, hundreds of years, and France is on your doorstep and they're doing, I can give you the name of some great French wines under $20 that you just got to put in your cellar and they're just fantastic. And then you compare it with that for price. I'm talking about price, not style or preference. It's really hard. And the supermarkets drive, where wine is bought pretty much. And they've got, I bought Howard Park?
Yes.
I bought a Howard Park Chardonnay in the shops for $18 and it's more expensive here. How does that work? I don't understand that, right? I don't understand that. It's a really nice wine, nothing wrong with wine. But the supermarkets, because of scale, economies of scale, they can do that kind of stuff. And so when you go into a supermarket and you can get a really good wine for $18, and let's do this again, 3 times £6, which is $36, the average person isn't going to be buying a Bacchus, which they've never heard of, when for all their lives they know what a Chardonnay from Margaret River is, or let's go to France, they know what Champagne is, or a Loire Valley Sancerre.
Yeah.
That's the challenge we have in the UK, is that we're high end in price, and what we're competing with is a lot of people are going. So I have to be honest, I think a lot of people are drinking English wines because they're trying to be English. I want to support England and I want to support the British market and I want to, and also curiosity. I wonder what it tastes like.
Yeah.
Yes.
But then I taste that and it doesn't wow me.
Yeah.
Were you wowed by that?
No. I wasn't wowed. But I
but
also
don't
wasn't.
You want to be? Yeah,
I do want to be. I wasn't disappointed in that. I didn't think it was a bad quality wine. I just wasn't wowed. Yeah.
And I think when you're paying $36 a bottle, that's not cheap, even for Australian terms. I don't know what your average wine bottle would be here. What would be average?
It'll vary, but probably around $20 to $30, yeah.
Okay. So that's a little bit above average. Yeah. So if you're comparing that to an Aussie Riesling or an Aussie Semillon, so I don't understand how cheap they are. If you're comparing the two and you want to drink Australian, well, why wouldn't you at that price? So it's really hard. They've got oversupply, under market. A lot of people won't be doing that. They've got to be really careful because everyone's jumping on the bandwagon and saying, hey, we can make money on English wine. Well, up to a point.
I have to think about that.
Buy British and all that.
Yeah, I think that's true. And not just that, meat and poultry and what have you,
Well, at least we know a couple of the varieties and the wines that are coming out of there. We've had a white. Let's move on to the red. And so we have in front of us the Bolney Estate Dark Harvest 2022. What kind of grape variety is this one?
So you're going to love this. And its majority is Rondo. And Rondo is another hybrid. This was made in 1964, not the wine, but the variety. Yep. And it was a mix between Saint Laurent, so Laurent, which is an Austrian grape. Really nice, very light. And Austria gets a lot of poor weather too. It's a red grape, works really well in Austria. And then they blended it with something called Zarja Severa.
Yep. Okay.
Exactly. So what you've got is this hybrid, 2 grapes made in 1964 in a laboratory, and it works in England because it's disease resistant. It's not resistant 100%, of course, but it just gives you a greater opportunity to grow red wines in England. And
where there's a lot of rain, where you'd think there'd be a lot of disease.
Well, the challenge is with England is you've got a lot of the English wine history was made on claret, and claret is Bordeaux. So since the 1600s, 1700s, 1800s, the English aristocracy has fundamentally either had whites from Germany and reds from Bordeaux.
Yeah.
So there's a real culture at that kind of level for red wines. Also, it's blinking cold.
Yeah.
So when it's cold, you want to go red wine, not white wine. So in the English market, they're going to have to do red wine to compete. Otherwise, they'll just say, well, we'll just do whites.
Yeah.
And then there's a market opportunity for reds that they're not doing. And when you go wine tasting, I don't know about you guys, but you'd usually do white and then you move on to the reds. So that these winemakers obviously want to have a balanced portfolio, which I understand completely. And so, but what they recognize is they can't grow Shiraz. It's just not going to work. They can't grow Grenache. It's not going to work. They can't grow Malbec. They can't grow Cabernet Sauvignon. They can't grow, it just will not grow because it's too wet.
Yeah.
So what can they grow? So they're using a clone of Pinot Noir called Pinot Noir Precoce, Precoce, and a lot of vineyards are using that clone of Pinot Noir because it ripens and it works. But a lot of them are moving on to grapes such as Regent, Solaris, Madeleine Angevine, and this is I think it's 90% Rondo, and it's a small percentage of Dornfelder from Germany and Austria.
I was hoping you'd say Pinot in there because there's some elements of this that remind me of that. Sorry, Trent, you were going to say something?
I was saying all those great varietals I never heard of before.
And that's the curiosity, Trent, right? That's the curiosity. So it's like someone says to you, there's Rondo and Dornfelder. And my brain goes, now my friend Google's going to help me because I need to understand what that's all about because I've never heard of it either.
Yeah, I go, Dornfelder sounds German. And then I go, Rondo's like this town, like south of Spain or something like that.
Yeah.
I go...
It's like Zorro lives in Rondo, you know what I mean? What do you think?
On the nose, I was kind of, what did I write down? There's kind of a meatiness to it. There's a bit of earthiness that's coming through. The fruit, sweetness of a fruit that was coming through.
Yeah.
Like I had like a cola kind of flavor that was coming through, which is why I thought Pinot. Medium body, medium alcohol, medium to low. Yeah.
Yeah.
Acid, sorry.
The first thing that I look for when I look at on the nose anyway is it red fruit or black fruit? That's the first thing I want to know.
Yeah.
And that usually tells me. And the color kind of helps. I mean, this is not a dark wine. It's darker, but you can still see, you can still see your finger at the bottom. So that's medium for me in terms of color. It's not deep. I can see my finger through that. So, but it's more purple. Can you see that? There's a real purple note to it as opposed to red.
Yeah, I put dried violets type of thing.
I think there's a bit of that. So I'm looking at that going, maybe there's a bit of red and black fruit in there.
Yeah.
So the minute I'm starting to look for plums, because when I think red, I just think plum, red and black.
I literally had that kind of sweet plums.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Which is that kind of sweetness, but it has this kind of, I don't know, I put like earth to your point, but like this funk and muskiness to it.
I understand what you're saying.
Yeah. But it's very, again, light tannins, medium acidity. No oak? Like, is there...
So on the website, when I bought this wine, it doesn't actually have technical sheets.
Yeah.
So, which is another issue.
Yeah.
People are getting, Australians are really good. You go on an Aussie website, they tell you everything about the technicality. Australian winemaking, in my opinion, is the most advanced wine in terms of technical quality. And the wine, I mean, you must have felt this when you went down to Beechworth. You don't get a bad wine. You might not like it, but it's never a bad wine. You don't get VA, volatile acidity. You don't get, Brett. You don't get any of those faults that, you would get in wines, years ago. They're all so brilliantly made. And I think that's a credit to Australian winemaking has come on. I think they've got to get more terroir driven and more, typicity driven. That's going to come next. So when you go back to this and you start to say, well, what's that all about? I'm not sure of the quality of the winemaking. And I don't know if that's the grape because I've never tasted Rondo mixed with Dornfelder before. Yeah. So I don't know.
Yeah.
And how many Dornfelders and Rondo blends have you guys tried?
Zero.
Because, unless you're going to get a Blanc de Noir, unless you're going to get, a champagne style wine from England, a sparkling that's pink and rosé, you're probably not going to taste a lot of red grapes from England because of the reasons I just said. So this is just fascinating to explore where that's going.
Intriguing.
Because they're trying to get some body into it.
Yeah, I said I'm not getting much oak, which is, I guess, more fruit driven type of wine, but it goes on the palate and then just kind of dies away. I think quite quickly for me.
It's on the back of the label, medium-bodied, full of red and black fruit flavors, complemented by some smoky notes. The finish is bold with peppercorn spice.
It sounds like if you read that, I'm feeling Shiraz, but it's not Shiraz.
That's really interesting. I'm also getting things like rhubarb, if you've ever had rhubarb before.
I had cooked rhubarb. But
yeah, I think it's got a little bit of cooked rhubarb in there. In the palate, not on the nose. Some good acidity on that, which you'd expect from England because it's so north.
Yeah.
So you're going to get some acidity, like you do with Chablis and Champagne. The tannins are very soft.
Probably more of a thin, without looking at the grapes, more of a thinner skin grape.
I don't know, actually. I don't know the answer, but the wine is much thinner than I think. That's a really interesting point, actually. I hadn't considered. I think it smells like a heavier wine than it actually tastes. So the taste is, it does die a little bit. And it has that meaty, gamey kind of note.
Yeah, that's why I said meaty, gamey, funky, musky type of thing. Yeah,
and I'm not sure how I'd describe it. Maybe that's how we describe it. Funky, meaty, musky.
Yeah.
It does have a bit of a finish of that peppercorn, the black peppercorn. You can,
and that would be
you can feel that.
That's probably seen some oak because
old oak or something.
Oh, I got no idea. Because the winemaker didn't actually tell us anything.
I thought English is all about tradition and process and
tradition, yes. Processed, I think it depends where you go. Some people are more process driven than others. The other thing about comparing, Australia with other places, we're in Australia, so it's hard not to talk about it. Many winemakers in Australia have come from a scientific background. So they've come from the CSIRO, or they've come from chemical backgrounds, doctor backgrounds, pharmaceutical backgrounds. And so what happens is there's a precision with their approach to making wines. What you have in England is they're not coming from those backgrounds.
It comes from the heart, though, right?
It might, and also it might.
Okay, yeah.
It could also be an economic thing.
Yeah.
Remember, there's about 1,000 wineries in England, which is quite a lot. 1,000 wineries. Australia hasn't got that much more.
All in the south, though, right?
Yeah, mostly in the south. So in the south, you've got 10 or 12 counties. So there's about 50 counties, but or maybe less, 35, 40 counties. So it's predominantly in the south. So if England's down here and you move up here to Scotland. So all in the south of London, Hampshire, Sussex, East Sussex, Cornwall, Devon, Kent, that's where you're going to have probably 80% of the vines are going to be in that area. So even if you wanted a wine further, I can show you pictures on my phone. There's a vineyard just been planted a mile from where I live, and it's on this fantastic hill, but it's in Manchester, which is in a rain shadow. And this guy's already fighting disease, and he's already fighting snow. I've got pictures of snow in the vineyard. And what was so fascinating was I was down in Orange last week, and one of the winemakers showed me his 1-year-old vines. And I said to him, wow, are they like 2 or 3 years old? And he said, oh, no, they're about 7 months. And I remember my mate in Manchester, he's got them 2 years and they're smaller than the vines that he's got. And that put it in perspective for me about the challenges that they're trying to make it in cold climate. It doesn't grow. And he's growing Solaris, which is a peewee grape, and he's growing Pinot Noir Precoce, and I think he's maybe growing another white, maybe Madeleine Angevine. I got no idea. I've given him some money. I've bought a case in advance. You want to support your local winery, but I have no idea how it's going to go.
Yeah.
You're really painting a picture like it's a challenge. Like for English wines, they want to have it up and running, but it's a challenge to grow at a market and customer perspective, but also just purely at the grassroots in terms of growing great quality grapes.
For still wines, Jason, not for sparkling. For sparkling wine, they've been through all of that and they're competitive. There's a market of equal quality to many sparkling wines around the world, if not, better. They are priced equivalently to some of the best champagnes. So I'm not saying they're wrongly priced. I'm just saying they're expensive for the average. Like champagnes, expensive. So I'm not saying that's right or wrong. When it comes to still wines, I think that's the challenge, still wines.
Yeah.
Because the still wine is competing with Burgundy, with Bordeaux, with the Rhone Valley, with Sangiovese in Tuscany, with Piemonte, Nebbiolos. That's what they're competing with.
Or even with the New World, right? With the bargains from the New World as well.
And there's nothing wrong with this.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And by the way, that was £16, which is $32.
Yeah.
So that's a $32 wine.
Yeah.
And it's interesting.
But if you had other options to line up against it, would you choose that?
You talk about value, right?
But that's the cost of making wine in England. You can't make a $7 wine.
Yeah.
You can't make I went to Vintage Cellars earlier, and I said to this guy, there's a Yalumba Y series, and it was a Viognier for $10. And I'm like, how do you make that for $10? That's £5. Well, it's £5 versus £16. Now, I don't know what the Viognier tastes like from Yalumba. I haven't tried it. But so what did you think?
Again, I thought it was interesting to try something different. Overall, similar sentiment. I wasn't amazed by it. I do think it fell a bit flat in terms of the flavor for me. But it wasn't a bad wine. It wasn't at all.
It's a red wine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For me, the nose on it really intrigues me. And then that's probably what I'm probably more than the taste. The nose on it.
Chuck it with a pizza and let the pizza do the job, and then I'd chill it. I'd probably chill it a little bit as well. But have it with a pizza. Don't make. I don't think that's a complex wine.
Yes, it's a great introduction into both white and a red still
wine
from the English wine regions. Did you have any other questions on English wines as part
Probably
of the
more
master?
questions, probably just more reflections, and it's to the point around curiosity. So I love the fact that we're kind of going to the UK now, or GB wines, and trying these still wines, but it's to the point around kind of drink more, try more, learn more. Again, it's kind of sparking the curiosity, kind of increasing that palate. I mentioned to you, like, you've kind of drunk all over the world, and it's great to have that kind of foundation to kind of compare against. And now I understand a bit more about English wines, or fascinated about where it could go as well. And also the challenges that they have as well, to be very straightforward about it. But yeah, thank you for sharing.
No, you're welcome.
This, and also teaching us a bit about English wines.
No, it's been fun.
Absolutely. I did have a few questions just in regards to yourself and your journey. You've had a lot of time to travel the world, spending a lot of time in England and now back here. Are there any upcoming Aussie areas or wineries that you think people should be looking out for?
Yeah, there's loads. There really is loads. I had a Viognier from the Granite Belt in Queensland. I never thought that the Granite Belt in Queensland would make a Viognier that was so delicious. It blew me away. And then you go, maybe I should visit the Granite Belt, because what else is up there that everyone else is already dismissing because it's too warm?
Yeah.
So I would be looking at that. I think the other thing is you go to Western Australia. We were talking earlier about the Wine Blast podcast, where Peter and Susie are going into Paronga up, Mount Barker, the Swan Valley. I think that area, I think this Great Southern.
Yeah.
I think down there, I got no idea what else is going on down there, but it looks pretty exciting.
Yeah.
But I've looked at a lot of wine lists since I've been here in Australia, particularly in New South Wales. And the thing that disappoints me more than anything else is I went into a restaurant the other week, and there was 41 wines on the list, and 3 of them were from New South Wales. And there was 2 from Riverina and 1 from Mudgee. And I'm thinking Orange, Mudgee, Canberra. Oh, for goodness sake, Canberra. Forget the Hunter. Hunter is just amazing. I love the Hunter now, but everybody knows the Hunter.
Yeah.
Tumbarumba.
Yeah, hilltops.
Oh,
yeah.
I went to a tasting under the Harbour Bridge when I first arrived, and the winery was Mount Tumbarumba, and I tasted their Chardonnay. It was the Chardonnay of the show. And I'm thinking, I've got to get more than this. And then I was speaking to someone in Orange, and they get their white grapes from Tumbarumba. And I was out at the Urban Wine Walk yesterday, and I was talking to a producer from Orange, and they said, oh yeah, but we're getting our Chardonnay from Tumbarumba. So I want to know what's going on in Tumbarumba. Geelong. There's been some really interesting things done in Geelong and Mornington Peninsula. Yeah. Just go explore, go traveling.
And so that probably takes us to the tail end of the class. Did you have any last messages you wanted to share with our audience about anything?
Try not to think that because I've had this, they're all like that. I think you've got to try a Shiraz, try a different Shiraz. If you didn't like that one, try another Shiraz. Just keep trying.
Yeah.
You don't have to like it, but don't stop trying because you didn't like the last one. That's like your kids, yeah? They don't like green vegetables.
Yeah.
Well, they don't like the green vegetables now. That doesn't mean they're never going to like green vegetables.
I think they're going to say if I do like the kid, I can swap it out for something else.
Yeah, don't give your kids the wine, right? We're not suggesting giving children wine.
Really appreciate you spending the time with us here. I think for me, it's been great to kind of learn more and get exposure to English wines, but also just listening to you and talk to your point around just question things just in life in general. I think that's a great thing to have. And so my question is going to be, where is this going to be in the future, English wines, in terms of still? It's something to watch out for and see how those challenges can be overcome.
And I think they will. I think that there's passion, there's energy, there's commitment, there's money. They'll get there.
Absolutely. Thanks again, Tony.
You're welcome.
Look, for our viewers and listeners out there, let us know in the comments below if you recommend any specific English wines. As we like to say here, drink more, try more, learn more. Thanks all.